Personally, I just like a nice mid skin fade.
Mid skin.
You can drop it down a little bit towards the back, and then maybe like a quarter of an inch off the top. But this is generally the hairstyle I do.
Okay.
Then parted and then blend it all the way around.
To create my first guideline, I'm going to use the trimmers. Some barbers like to do this. That creates a real hard line, so I don't usually like to do that. So instead, what I like to do is flip the trimmer over like this and bring it up to where I want to stop that first guideline. That's going to make it a little easier to remove later. As I get close to this line where I want to kind of stop it, that's where I'm going to start kind of flicking the trimmer out a little bit. It's going to help make that line a little bit easier to erase later by making it a softer line. So right now I'm checking to make sure it's even by having him turn sideways so that I can see this side in the mirror. So when I make my guideline on this side, I'm looking at the mirror, so I make sure that the guides are even. So and then once I do that, I'll turn them and then compare both sides to make sure that the fade isn't like a low fade on one side and a high fade on the other side. Let's check to make sure that that's even. Maybe go a little higher on this side. Right, now that I got that first step done, I'm gonna use my shaver. So this is my shaver. This is what I'm gonna use to get rid of this little bit of stubble that's right here and make it an actual skin fade where it's smooth to the touch and bald, essentially. When I'm working in tight spaces like this, I'm using just a single foil. And then when I'm in an area where there is more room to work with, I'll flip it over and use both just to get more done at the same time. My favorite thing about being a barber is that I get to meet a lot of people, and I would normally not meet a lot of people because I'm a homebody, and I get to learn from people too. Sometimes people have really cool jobs, so you get to learn a lot from people, you know, doctors, lawyers, anybody that has like a cool professional job, you get to learn a lot from them. So that's probably my favorite part. When I became a barber, I mean, that was like the thing. Like every haircut was like a skin fade, so I got a lot of practice with that. Nowadays, though, the haircuts are getting longer, it seems like, so I definitely like doing skin fades because I got a lot more practice with those.
Yeah, skin fade takes a little bit longer.
It does, yeah. I mean, it looks good, especially with somebody with your hair, but, you know, it definitely takes longer, more skill. Sometimes haircuts can be functional, too, you know, like some people have different type of work that they're outside, so a haircut, you know, like this would keep them cool. You know, we're in Florida, Florida gets hot, so yeah, for sure. Also depends on your face shape, though. Sometimes maybe you should think about a different style, but if depending on your face shape, but the way his face is shaped, I think this is a great haircut for him. So these are my Gamma clippers with the lever all the way open. And I got my first step done. I'm gonna make my next guideline now with this lever fully open. So going up about 1 finger width minimum is usually about like the least room I would give myself, because if it's less than that, then it's really hard to do all the steps that you need to go from skin to the next step, which would be about a half or a 1. That's the main thing I see barbers struggle with when they're struggling with skin fades most of the time. If their clippers are set, usually because they're not giving themselves enough room right there. So you keep staying all day here trying to erase this line, and all you're doing is creating a new line because you don't have enough room to really blend it. I almost always scoop when I'm making these lines because it makes it a lot easier to remove later. I could just do this where it's just like the blade is flat on the skin the whole time, but I found that if you do a little scooping motion at the end, then it softens up that line a bit and makes it easier to remove later. So that could be another reason why haircuts are taking you a long time, is because you're just lines, and hard lines are hard to remove. So you want to try to make soft lines whenever possible. And this is a fade blade on here, so it's going to get a little closer to the skin, which means it's even more motion when you have a fade blade on your clipper. So now that we got our next guideline established, I'm going to do my lever halfway closed and start working on erasing this first line that we created with the trimmers. How you doing, Clint?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See this blade right here? This has a fade blade, so it's flat. It's very thin too. This is actually a vapor blade, which is kind of in between a taper blade and a fade blade, and it has this little ridge that helps with that scooping motion. So typically, and so this isn't a true taper blade, but if you're doing a lot of tapers and you're not going all the way down to the skin, then a taper blade might be better for that. A skin fade, then a fade blade might be better. The reason this blade exists is because it's kind of in the middle. So you get a little bit of the best of both with this type of blade. But it's ultimately, I think, a personal preference which one you choose. Highly recommend using a brush like this if you're doing any sort of fade. Generally, my rule is if it's a number 1 guard or lower, there's a brush in my hand. Anything higher than that, I'm usually gonna have a comb. Because the brush kind of helps lay that hair down, and it also clears like any loose hair that might be just laying on the scalp. So it basically keeps the haircut clean so you can see what you're doing, have a better idea of what it actually looks like. Where a comb, the hair might just stick to the skin. The hair might lie to you, it might look like it's not faded, but it is. So sometimes you just need a brush to clean that stuff away so that you can see what it actually looks like. Next step, I'm gonna go 1 notch closer. So we're not fully closed, we're 1 above. And I'm gonna start here and then work my way around the other way. I'm doing what's called revolution cutting right now. So since we stopped here, I'm gonna start here now. So there's no point of turning him all the way around and starting on the other side. I'm right here, he's right here. So we'll just start right where he's at. That's a efficiency thing. If you're working in tight spaces, or if you're not 100% sure about that length that you have set on the clipper, it's okay to just use the corners to kind of test it and see what does that do. Also, if you're working in tight spaces, highly recommend that you use the corners because it'll help avoid making a new line, which is going to extend the haircut time if you are constantly creating new lines. So I just finished that step with the lever 1 notch open. Now I'm going to close it up all the way. And these are 0 gap, so this should get pretty close to erasing that first line that I made with the trimmers. That doesn't always happen, but that's when you take the trimmers back. Generally, whatever you use to make the line is what you use to take it out. So this might get the line out, but if it doesn't, the trimmers probably will. So 0 gapping your clippers basically means you're loosening these 2 screws right here, and you're pushing those 2 blades. There's a moving blade and a non-moving blade. And there's a gap that is in between when they come from the factory. And when you are 0 gapping your clippers, you're just basically making that gap almost 0. And that makes it cut closer to the skin, which makes it easier to erase these lines when you're working in these short lengths. If you don't do a lot of skin fades, you don't need to worry about 0 gapping your clippers. But if you do, definitely recommend having at least 1 clipper on your station. You just have to be careful because they can be sharp, so you don't want to use them on people that have sensitive skin, especially doing a taper or something like that. Just open it up maybe 1 notch if you're doing something like that. So I'm just using basically the corners of my clippers right now because I really don't want to create a whole new line and have to raise the fade even higher. Generally a good practice when you're getting close to the end of a step to just use the corners just to be safe, so you don't erase all the progress you just made. I'm jealous of people that own barbershops and don't know how to cut hair. I don't know how you do it. How do you train your people? How do you know what a good haircut looks like? So I think you should know how to cut hair if you're an owner. But respect if you don't. All right, so I'm just gonna recap everything we've done up to this point. So we started by taking all this hair off with the trimmers, and then we used the shaver to take it all the way smooth. And then I did my my clipper lever all the way open with no guard to make this line, and then we blended it down. So the next step I'm gonna do is the number 1 guard, which looks like this, and with the lever all the way open to create my next guideline. So once you get past this step here, you can start making these guides a little bit smaller in between. They don't always have to be a finger width apart. It's just, this is the most important part, going from skin to half. Beyond that, you can start making them a little bit smaller. unless you feel like you need more room. Now I'm going to close my clipper lever all the way and start working on erasing this line right here. It's normal to have a little bit of a line left after you do this step, so that's where that half guard is going to come in, because it's going to help tie those two lengths together. In my opinion, the two most important guards are the half guard and the 1.5 whenever you're doing a skin fade. Very hard to get those lines out without that. And you gotta have your clipper zero gap. Do you want to do a perm too?
No, I'm good.
No?
I'm
Okay.
good.
No problem. I don't know how to do them anyways. So. All right, and then I'm gonna open up the lever like halfway to start working on smoothing out the line that was left over from the one into the lever with no guard. And if it starts getting hard to see like the line, that's a good thing. That means you're almost done. That's also a signal that maybe you should just start with just the corners, because you don't want to go in there and make a new line. So I'm just gonna start with the corners, since it's kind of hard for me to see where this line is on this side of the head, which is good, but I'm just gonna start with the corners just to be safe. Now, the only reason this line was like pretty hard to see was because that first step when I was creating it and I was scooping out a little bit. So the things that you do when you start the haircut make the rest of the haircut a little bit easier. So this is a 2, and so I'm just gonna do all the steps that I just did in reverse order to smooth out the blend. So this does 2 things. It smooths out the blend. It also if I missed any hairs in the first few steps, it'll help catch that. It's like cross-checking, but for the sides. So this is a 2. So now that was a 2. I'm working with the 1.5 again, just going right underneath what I just did. I stepped out of the way because I need the light sometimes to see what I'm doing. Lighting is very important to what we do. Typically, I'd be standing over here, right? Because then I got the light from both lights. And now I'm switching to my 1 again.
I'm going to show you what I'm going for. Perfect. Some ugly duckling phase right now, where they all fall out.
No guard now. Lever all the way open.
But if you spin me towards the end, I'll show you where I'm dealing with these. Super high. Because it used to, get Combover hats long and painted. But I'd love to.
For one of the final steps for the sides, I'm going to use the trimmers just to soften up any lines that I might have made initially. Just the corners. And since I got the trimmers in my hand, might as well go ahead and do the lineup.
Even on both sides, like just comb it back and then growth from it. First he goes that way.
Like that.
Yeah.
Good way.
Can you see without your glasses? Okay, good.
This left side is so long, you know, because that's how I guess you can cut it so I can come over. But I want to just maybe go back. So should I match the length on both sides just so it's even, and then just comb it back?
If you're gonna commit to combing it back.
Yeah, like I can comb it. I mean, I got this.
Go ahead and just match it.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna stick on you for a little while.
Stick bonding.
And then you just gonna stick up while it's learning where it goes.
Yeah.
So you have to use some product to trim this.
Yeah, just trim it a little bit.
Now to finish tying the sides into the top, I'm just gonna probably do a lot more scissor work now. So using scissors, texturizing shears, just to tie the sides in. And then pretty close to the ends. So this bolt right here, I'm gonna start by using my scissors to take that down and then go from there. So I'm using the comb as basically a guard. And just lifting up the hair that I want to cut and angling it towards me, similar with the clip over comb, and then using a guide, and then just making it
Yeah.
So that was also your concern when you go back.
There's a lot of different ways of blending. This is one of them. You can also do a clipper over comb. You can do a trimmer. Since I feel like this is pretty blended, but it's still a little choppy, I'm gonna go in there with the texturizing shears now to kind of smooth that out. Maybe even use a clipper to just smooth that out some more. The way these texturizing shears are designed is just cutting. It's not making a harsh line. It's cutting like some hairs, not all of them. So that adds some texture and helps kind of hide any lines that might be in there. I'm sorry if these are pulling.
You're okay.
If you're not sure if a haircut's well blended, then you can either use the mirror to take a couple steps back and look at it from a different angle, or just take a picture of it with your phone and then check it out. Because camera doesn't lie. And sometimes you just need a little bit of a different perspective to tell if a haircut's really blended.
That side of it. Now he's throwing out for what's it playing on the other side of the pot.
Okay, so here's a tip if ever you do a skin fade. Always after you clean up the back of the neck and you have the razor in your hand, just go ahead and double check around the ears because there's almost always hairs left behind. So just take your razor anytime you do a head shave or a skin fade and just check around the ears. And if there's usually some hairs left there, you can just grab that with the razor. Got it? So right now I'm putting in this Gibbs Tea Tree matte cream in his hair. It's got a medium hold with a matte finish. His hair is pretty dry. If it was more wet than this, I would probably dry it a little bit more because this is a water-soluble product, so it would just break apart if his hair was completely soaked. So that's a good tip if you feel like you're using a lot of product. Try drying your hair out a little bit more before you put it in. That way that product will have a stronger hold.